please take a moment right now to hit like, subscribe, and share.
Especially share. That's the big one.
Hello, film historians. I'm Derek and I love old movies. We've got Sam the sidekick here.
Hello, and welcome to episode 48. We're still in all listener request July, and this week we'll be looking at a film that's a bit less old, maybe, for us anyway. But it's a request, and requests make us do strange things.
That is true. That always happens. This time we're going to go back to the Burt Lancaster well one more time, and we will be having a look at the 1968 experimental indie film, The Swimmer.
You've told me about this film.
I have.
I've never really wanted to see it.
You have not.
And yet...
Here we are.
And this request was made by John, who was one of our listeners. So thanks for listening, and thanks for the request.
Totally. Oh, well, should we just get down to business and get on with things?
Yes. There's just one more thing.
Oh, what's that?
Hey, everyone. It was my dad's birthday yesterday.
No.
Be sure to give him a big birthday shout-out in the comments.
What? Why did you do that?
You got me on the graduation thing. Fair is fair.
Okay, then.
Do the business.
Right. Well, if you are on an audio-only platform, see about dropping us some stars, maybe a quick review.
You'd be surprised how much that sort of thing really helps.
And then, why not check us out, you know what I'm going to say, on the socials.
Why not indeed? After all, we are on the Facebook.
I Love Old Movies, the podcast.
The Instagram.
At I Love Old Movies, the podcast.
Twitter.
At ILOM podcast.
And the good old-fashioned email.
I Love Old Movies, the podcast at gmail.com.
All one word.
And of course, you should also do what the cool kids do, and that is Pet the Rock. By that, I mean head on over to petrockradio.ca to listen to amazing local web-based radio programming with thrilling hosts, fantastic music, and previous episodes of our show broadcast 1, 2, 3 times a week.
Monday, Saturday, and Sunday.
What the heck? That's pretty cool.
We'll link that for you in the description.
So, are you all set to swim the channels and eddies of the Lucinda River in a vain attempt to return to a home you once knew?
I can even pronounce portage properly. Of course I'm ready. Hit the music.
One half of our director-writer duo is Frank Perry. Despite having an interest in theater and producing several plays, Perry didn't get his start in the film industry until 1962 after serving in the Korean War, when he directed David and Lisa with his then-wife, Eleanor Perry. The film was well received and critically acclaimed, and even earned them nominations for Academy Awards for writing and directing. The two released several films together in the 1960s, including The Swimmer in '68, Last Summer in '69, and Trilogy, also in '69. After divorcing from his wife in 1970, Perry's career slowed down a bit as he only worked on a few films in the 1970s, such as Play It As It Lays and Ranch Deluxe. He continued at the same pace into the 80s and is probably most memorable for his work on the eventual cult classic Mommy Dearest in 1981, which won the Razzie Award for Worst Picture and earned Perry a nomination for Worst Director. He continued working late into his career, with his last film being the documentary On the Bridge in 1992. Retiring with a total of 21 directing credits in his career, Frank Perry died in 1995 at the age of 65.
The writer of our duo is Eleanor Perry. Perry's early career mainly focused on writing suspense novels, such as Paper Chase, which was adapted into the film Dangerous Partners in 1945. She also wrote several plays during this time, including Third Best Sport, which was produced on Broadway in 1958. After marrying Frank Perry, the two spent the 60s releasing various films, including The Swimmer in 1968 and The Diary of a Mad Housewife in 1970, A few years earlier, Perry collaborated with Truman Capote to adapt the novella A Christmas Memory into the series ABC Stage 67 in 1966. Her career slowed down in the 70s, only writing a couple screenplays and divorcing Frank Perry in 1971. In 1977, Perry became an associate of the Women's Institute for Freedom of the Press, and 2 years later, she published a novel about her experiences as a female screenwriter in Hollywood titled Blue Pages. Finishing her career with a total of 20 writing credits, Eleanor Perry died in 1981 at the age of 66.
Turning up in one of the vignettes in The Swimmer was renowned actress Kim Hunter. Hunter made her screen debut in 1943 with the film noir The Seventh Victim, and although she was playing leads soon enough, it was her Broadway portrayal of Stella Kowalski in A Streetcar Named Desire that really paved her pathway to fame. She appeared in the film version, winning the Oscar and Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actress, and along the way she became a founding member of the Actors Studio. Hunter was actually blacklisted by the HUAC in the 1950s and was blocked from appearing in films, but did turn up in a good deal of television shows, most notably the presentation of Requiem for a Heavyweight. I like to think of Hunter as being most famous for her role as Zira in Planet of the Apes, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, and Escape from the Planet of the Apes. These films are where I first discovered her, and I always felt she was able to project so much, well, humanity and humor from underneath all the makeup, prosthesis, and costuming. Much more so, if we want to get real for a moment, than I ever felt Roddy McDowall did. Hunter made the usual rounds of guest appearances in 1970s-era TV shows, also appearing regularly on the soap opera Edge of Night, for which she would win a Daytime Emmy. Hunter's last film appearance was Here's to Life, which came out 2 years before her death in 2002, at the age of 79.
Making her film debut in The Swimmer was another actress with some genuine science fiction cred, Diana Muldaur. Muldaur began her career, which was mostly focused on television work, in the early 1960s on series such as The Doctors and Dr. Kildare. Through most of the 60s and 70s, she was relegated to guest star of the week on the typical assortment of shows before landing on LA Law in the 80s and became president of the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences. She might be better known for her roles on McCloud and Born Free. But really, what sets Muldaur apart is her role as a geek icon. Let's see. Back in the 60s, she appeared in 2 episodes of the original Star Trek series, was in the Gene Roddenberry TV movie, Planet Earth, guested on The Incredible Hulk, played the ship's doctor for the entire second season of Star Trek The Next Generation, and then did voice work on Batman the Animated Series, playing Dr. Leslie Tompkins. Low-key, she should be held up as a geek icon actress, and I'm really surprised that she isn't. Muldaur hasn't appeared in anything since Batman, and is still alive, hopefully enjoying a peaceful retirement at the age of 83.
Based on a 12-page short story originally published in The New Yorker, The Swimmer was filmed largely in the director's hometown and was produced by Horizon Pictures. Now, this was the production company owned by Sam Spiegel, and he became so disillusioned with this project he removed his name from the credits as producer. After principal photography was completed, Spiegel fired the director and brought in Sidney Pollack, who is connected to Burt Lancaster, to do reshoots, some of which required recasting.
Reshoots I get, but when you recast too, it's like you're making a whole new movie.
Well, some thematic things were changed as well, with the horse racing scene now added into the film, and Ned Merrill made to seem like a bit less of a sexual predator.
We saw the toned-down version of that character?
Yeah.
Yeesh.
Reshoots became so extensive and costly that by the end, Lancaster was paying for things out of his own pocket.
I mean, anything to get it made, I guess.
Well, Burt took this film pretty seriously. He really wanted the role. He worked out like a madman, including all the way through production to maintain his great physique, and even took swimming lessons from an Olympic coach.
What did people even think of this film?
Critics were hit and miss on it, willing to praise the film for its bravery or boldness, while at the same time being very frank in their assessment of its lack of relatability and the unlikelihood of audiences being able to get into it.
And the box office?
Poor. Really, really poor.
So, El Floppo?
Oh yeah, domestically and internationally.
Well, they can't all be hits now, can they?
No, indeed. What's the tail of the tape on this one, Sam?
Okay, so we have a 7.6 on IMDb.
I'm stunned by that.
The audience score is 83% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Stunned.
And the tomato meter is 100%.
Stunned.
The film won no awards.
Not stunned.
The film can be rented or bought on YouTube or found at your local secondhand DVD shop.
Clad only in a bathing suit, Ned Merrill strolls through woodlands before dropping in at the home of friends to have a swim. While there, he realizes that through hiking and swimming in various pools, he can swim all the way home, in an imaginary river he names after his wife Lucinda. His friends are confused by his behavior and seem to know something about his life that Ned doesn't.
As he travels pool to pool, Ned comes across Julie, a girl who used to babysit his daughters. She is now 20, and he tries to hire her, which bemuses Julie. She confesses to having had a crush on Ned, and his attraction to her is quite evident. She accompanies him on his swim, even to a party of his friends, but once he comes onto her too strong, she runs away.
As Ned continues, he visits an older couple. They're wealthy and nudist. Ned drops his shorts and offers to contribute to their fundraiser, but they dismiss his offer, suggesting that they know he isn't good for the money.
Ned next meets a young boy who can't swim. They use an empty pool and imagine it has water in it. And as Ned meets more people at the next pool party, his ability to converse with them is increasingly limited. It's clear by their insinuations that Ned's life has gone off the rails somehow, but there's no indication of precisely what has happened to him. And for his part, he ignores it and continues on, obsessed with his journey, even as he shows increasing signs of fatigue and injury.
Ned meets another, younger, blonde girl and tries to convince her to join his journey. But he seems pretty disconnected from reality at this point, and she gets away from him. The owners of the pool and the hosts of the party he is now at seem to own a hot dog cart, but Ned claims it is his and that he had built it. He offers to buy it back, and everyone laughs at him. Ned looks to be in rough shape, and he's noticeably cold.
Next, Ned arrives at the home of Shirley, a professional actress and an old flame of his, with whom he had an affair with. He tries to rekindle the passion and talks about how great they were, but his details are all wrong and his timeline confused. Shirley's quite resentful that she was only ever the other woman, and when Ned makes his moves on her, she rejects him flatly and flees inside. Ned seems completely oblivious to why this might be.
Ned comes to a busy road of traffic, which he must cross. He's limping and slouching now, but he gets across and hits the last stop on his river, a public swimming pool. He has to beg for 50 cents to get let in, and he tries to swim, but it's too crowded. Some people he knows ask him about unpaid bills, his hoity-toity wife, and his enfant terrible daughters. They tell Ned that his daughters hate him and laugh at him. This information sends him scaling up the side of a large rock, leaving the pool area.
The weather has finally turned, the gorgeous sunshine of earlier replaced by darkness, cold, and rain. Ned arrives home, looking nothing like the confident, vibrant man who arrived at his friend's backyard so long ago. His yard is in disrepair, the plants all dead. His home is abandoned, and the windows are broken. Ned tries to open the door, but it is locked and he cannot get in.
The end.
Let's just pro and con this.
Okay, so as always, we don't actually rate films here on the show. There's no stars, there are no thumbs. We just tell you some things we liked.
Some things we didn't.
And then we recommend whether or not you might enjoy giving this one a watch.
Take it away.
My pros. Number 1, the supporting cast. With the narrative such as it is being broken down into a series of small vignettes, the supporting characters don't get a lot of setup time. They need to appear, be connected to the story, and make an impact. We need to believe them in order to believe Ned. And to an individual, they all do a really good job of making the most of short screen time and a script that underserves them. But it allows them to drop in clever little lines to deepen the mystery of Ned and his life. It is a well-acted film. Number 2. The mystery of Ned is far more interesting than his quest to swim his way home. What's up with his wife, his daughters, his career? Where has he been, and why? If you make believe hard enough that something is true, then for you it is true, Ned says. Is that the key? And if it is, what is he making believe of? In a film that isn't always the most interesting visual watch, the mystery keeps us guessing and engaged. Number 3. As the day goes on, the parties get larger, the weather less sunny, and the air colder. Also frostier is the treatment Ned receives from some of his hosts. And he responds to this by doubling down on his quest and calling himself noble and splendid. He's limping and cold and increasingly tired-looking and unwelcome where he goes. Why is this a pro? The way the narrative continues to unfold and collapse upon Ned is some clever writing. Number 4. Continuing with clever, the final scene is clever. With him arriving home at last, and since there's no pool, and he cannot fall into the water, it rains, and the water falls on him, essentially flipping the script, but still maintaining consistency. His home long abandoned, everything he has been searching for and returning to gone. I love a good sad ending, even if it leaves far too many questions unanswered. My cons. Number 1, the terrible opening scene credit sequence. The stroll through the park with the handheld jerky camera moving right to left, for goodness sake. It's jarring and off-putting, the constant shots of wildlife, geese and owls. What? Why? And why does it move from Burt's perspective to a third-person shot of him? It's too random and nonsensical. Number 2. It's a lot of Burt Lancaster in a pair of swim trunks. Your mileage may vary. And number 3, the music score is terrible and so locked into its era. It sounds like something from an early 70s police show with its suspenseful musical spikes. It's corny, hackneyed, repetitive, and annoying. The music does not in any way enhance this film. In the end, The Swimmer is a hard film to sum up. The Quixotean quest is an interesting hook, and the mystery of Ned's life is compelling enough. But the movie too often feels pointless. Ned isn't really relatable, so both his challenges and his angst are not something we can easily get into. We spend so much time trying to figure out what his deal is, we aren't identifying with him and sharing the load emotionally. And worse, he's a bit rapey. Screaming at a former mistress how she loved it, while attempting to force himself on her while she resists. We can't like him. And given the experimental nature of how the story is told, we have to pay extra close attention, which means hyper-focus on an increasingly unlikable character. And he's played by Burt Lancaster. What is this movie truly? Is it some postmodern take on the Odyssey? Is it some too clever commentary about falling from grace? There was an attempt to create art here, to conduct an experiment, but to what end? What was the point? And what are we as audiences left to ponder? When you watch a film, and the point of the film is to try to figure out what the film was about, well, that's 95 minutes I'd rather spend doing anything else. Is this film part of the Burt Lancaster Paradox? I don't think so. I didn't enjoy the film, and I wouldn't have, no matter who was in it. In fact, Lancaster being in it works so well for me. An actor I don't like playing a character I cannot possibly buy into. And this comes back to the tagline of the film. When you talk about the swimmer, will you talk about yourself? No. No, I won't. Because there's nothing in that film to relate to. I've seen this film several times now, and I guess I'm a glutton for punishment, but I can't in good faith recommend it to anyone. This gets a don't watch from me. You're up.
Okay, so my pros. 1. The blurry shots. These were kinda nifty. They mainly happened when Burt Lancaster was out in the forest, and it happened a couple times when he was with Julie. A shot of the trees would get all blurry and unfocused, so you could only really see colors and vague outlines. Then we could only hear the disembodied voices talking as they walked through the trees. It was kind of cool and gave a sort of dreamlike quality to the scenes they were in. 2. The supporting characters. They were great. All the characters had very strong personalities, and they were able to convey that through the short amount of time on screen. And some of them seemed really interesting too. Like, I want to know more about that older wealthy couple and their fundraiser. What's their deal? I was honestly more invested and interested in the lives and stories of the supporting cast than I was Burt Lancaster's character. 3. The premise of the film. The idea that there's this guy who's going to swim home through different pools is pretty interesting. It's this adventure he's going on to get home. Plus, he seems to know everyone who owns each pool, but they progressively get less and less happy to see him at each house. There are so many questions and things you want answered throughout the story. It's interesting and gets you invested in finding out what's actually going on. Overall, I think the idea of this film was very interesting. Now my cons. 1. The intro. The music was fine, I guess, but everything else was terrible. The shots of the forest were jumpy and unclear. The movement of the camera was supposed to emulate walking or running or something, I think, but it came across as more just shoddy camera work. It honestly made me feel a little bit nauseous with the swaying back and forth. And it was right at the start of the film, too, so it didn't really leave me with high hopes for the rest of it. Plus, the font for the credits was so out of place. The yellow letters looked like they belonged in an entirely different genre of film, and they just didn't fit with the vibe of the movie. 2. Burt Lancaster. No. Just no. He was not enjoyable to watch at all. He delivered all his lines in that Burt Lancaster way. He was so uninteresting to watch on screen that I actively avoided watching him. Plus, his character was completely unlikable. He was pushy, pretty creepy, egotistical, and just overall a jerk. Considering he was the protagonist of the film, there was not a single thing that I liked about his role or his performance. 3. The horse. There was a lot going on in this film. That's fine. Not everything made sense, and things didn't always flow smoothly together. That's okay. But why the heck was there a whole scene in a field with the horse jumps? The initial interaction with the horse was awkward enough, but did we really need 5 minutes of Burt Lancaster and Julie running and jumping over low fences meant for horses? No, I don't think we did. The movie was already weird to begin with, but this sequence with the horse stuff was just out of place and unnecessary to the story. This was an interesting film. The idea was pretty cool, but the execution? It left a lot to be desired. I feel like the film had the potential to be good, but it really fell short in production. It was confusing, long, and slow. It was not captivating at all, really, and I even found myself struggling to pay attention at some points. So, should I give this a watch recommendation? I mean, if you're an avid Burt Lancaster fan, then go for it. But otherwise, I just don't think there's anything special about the film that makes it worth it. This is a don't watch.
Okay, and just like that, as always, we come to the end of another episode, and maybe a surprise, or maybe not, a double don't watch for the swimmer.
I'm totally okay with this episode being over.
Yep.
Remember what I said last week about revisiting old films we've done?
Yeah.
Not this one. Ever.
We are in agreement. But what about all of you? Is this a film you really get into? Is this a masterpiece you love and we just don't get? Let us know all about it in the comments or send us an email.
And be sure to join us next week for another listener request. This time, let's cleanse our palate with a little more Cary Grant.
Nothing goes down like some Cary Grant. It's a fact. Looking forward to it.
But until then, be sure to watch more movies.
And let everyone know about us. We're not a secret. You don't have to keep us all to yourselves.
So tell your friends.
Tell your enemies.
You never know. They might like taking a dip in a friend's pool as much as you do.
Maybe even more. For Sam the Sidekick, I'm Derek, and I love old movies. Additional research for I Love Old Movies, the podcast, is done by Nikki Weatherden. Audio clips come from freefx.co.uk. Images are used through the provisions of fair use, and our theme song, Burning Bridges, is by The Crocs.